It's that time of year. The time to talk fire, explosions, fireworks. It's July 4th.
Not anymore, it isn't.
Bastille Day?
Getting closer, and I do appreciate the French reference, but no.
The Olympics?
Close. I mean, they are closing today, in fact, but not that many explosions.
A random birthday in Hawaii? Okay, look, we're a bit late again, but that hasn't stopped us before. It's Splody Day! Welcome to the Music Arcade. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Music Arcade. I'm Galen the Sound Guy Firestone.
And I am Ranico.
And it's just the two of us today.
Yep.
Things are weirdly quiet, but also we're going to be talking about things that are very loud, namely blowing stuff up.
Yes, indeed. Explosions, as the intro suggested. This was a topic that came up right around the corner of the 4th of July, and it just moved a little, but honestly, things explode all the time.
Things do explode all the time, and let's be honest, we're used to kicking cans down the road. Remember the xylophone?
I will never forget the xylophone. It's part of my life now.
I know it is.
Anyway, things explode even more in video games, in fact, so that feels like a fitting theme anyway.
Yeah, there are very few games without explosions. Even, I think Mario 1 doesn't have explosions, because I think bombs weren't introduced to Mario 2 or 3.
Yeah, but like, think of a peaceful game. You thought of Stardew Valley. It has bombs.
Mm-hmm. If there's one thing I've learned from both video games and the Mythbusters, is that if you give a person a legal and ethically non-dubious way of blowing stuff up, they're going to, every time.
Honestly, that sounds like a great time.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah! So let's talk about some explosive music, and fittingly, this is going to make for an explosive start, because boy does that song's opening goes hard.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, if we're talking explosions, we kind of have to talk Mick Gordon, right? Like, he's just really good at writing music to blow stuff up to. I made a deliberate choice not to pick BFG Division because it's got 46 million views on YouTube. People know this song. Can I really add any new commentary to it?
Yes, people do know this song.
Yeah.
And Mick Gordon has done more than that. So.
Yes, he has. So I went with The New Order from Wolfenstein The New Order, which is also a throwback first-person shooter set to a modern day that Mick Gordon composed for a game published by Bethesda. It's a weird superlative, but he's so good at this specific superlative that I can't really ignore it. And yeah, this song goes hard. It's a very different energy than Doom for obvious reasons. It's a much more somber tone.
Yeah, because he's a good composer that knows to match the energy the game demands.
He's so good at that. I still listen back in awe to his contributions to Killer Instinct, which you helped introduce me to in no small part.
My pleasure.
And Wolfenstein is a much more somber, a much more thoughtful game than Doom, despite, again, being a throwback first-person shooter. It's good.
Yeah, it's got intensity, there's this mechanical horror aspect to it.
Yeah.
That you can hear in the choice of sounds. A lot of those guitars and those electronics are kind of reminiscent of two metal parts creaking against each other like they would in a giant mech walking.
Mm-hmm. And, Doom is, for all its violence, played a lot more lighthearted than Wolfenstein is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doom is meant to be this big action adventure. Wolfenstein, especially the Machine Games Wolfenstein games, is designed to make you think, while also being a rollicking actioner.
Yeah, there's drama in it. There's a sense of dread, of oppression in it that even the sound of explosions can't fully cover.
No, and I think that's kind of part of the genius of the soundtrack of this song. Again, Mick just really knows what he's doing. it just makes me hate id Software that much more for screwing him over as hard as they did.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's very clear to me that he wrote something kind of incredible here, and yes, something that is also to blow stuff up to. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think it's the main menu theme, something like that, yes?
It's the main menu theme, and I believe it also plays during parts of the intro raid into Death Sentence Compound.
I see. And like, just the fact you're saying intro raid in the Death Sentence Compound again, there's a lot of that oppression that's depicted there right away. Because there's not only the explosive start, but a much somber aftermath when things have blown up and you're just left with a ringing in your ears and ashes around you.
Yeah. I have a ton of respect for Wolfenstein: The New Order, and while I don't think the follow-up games, the Old Blood, New Colossus, and especially Youngblood really lived up to that first, I still do respect the franchise enough that I hope we get another one day.
Yeah. And just talking about this game's music in general, like, the fact that it's used music as collectibles to contribute to world building is just... Mwah.
Oh yeah. This song is so haunting in the best possible ways. Like, that lead guitar line is just brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Really gets to you if you listen to it. I don't know what else I can really add to this.
It's Mick Gordon doing what he does great, which is sometimes it feels like pretty much anything he puts his heart to.
Yeah. He really is versatile. Like, this sounds totally different from Prey, sounds totally different from Dune, sounds totally... Like, yeah. I once called him a one-trick pony who was really good at that trick. That is as far from the truth as it gets, and I'd like to apologize for ever thinking that. That was very early on in this podcast, and I really don't love that I said that.
He was a bit trapped. Reputation was as being the Doom guy, not to be confused with Doom guy, of course.
Right.
But by that point, he already practiced his craft pretty well on tracks like this one, or like Killer Instinct, or things we probably both don't even know about, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Even going back to our episode on him, he did that one, like... I know you said that one probably wasn't actually him, but there was that one, like, hip-hop tinge soundtrack. I would love to know which song he actually did on that one. If it was the one you posted or another one, I'm pretty convinced this guy could do everything. I think it's fair to call him my favorite Western composer.
Yeah. And it's a shame that I haven't heard him working on a video game project recently, but he certainly does keep practicing his craft and has been enjoying sharing a fair amount of a project and just honestly having a blast making dirty sounds and accompanying them with a whole atmosphere. Like, it feels really that when he composes something, he thinks of what's around it, which is probably why it lends itself so well to video games.
Yeah. On the subject of atmosphere, let's talk about a song in a game that's like 80% atmosphere.
Yeah, and 20% panic.
Yeah.
Keep talking and nobody explodes. It's a bit of a gimmick game in a way, but it's a very effective one.
In the world of asymmetric multiplayer, this one comes off as particularly unique.
Yeah, and it came out pretty early, too.
Mm-hmm.
So the principle, for those who don't know, is that one person has a bomb with different modules that are little puzzles that they need to solve. When all of the modules have been solved, the bomb is deactivated. There's a timer. The problem, they don't, or at least they're not supposed to know how those modules work.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody else has either printed or on a PDF the bomb manual, and they need to communicate efficiently with puzzles that are meant to be confusing to communicate on in order to deactivate this bomb. It's immense amounts of fun. I had a chance to play it with my brother, and it was as chaotic as the many more streams I've seen of this game make it look like. And yeah, it's super fun. And with a game that relies on vocal communication, you'd think the music could take a backseat, but no, because not only does it has a lot of importance given to sound with things like on some levels you have an electronic alarm that can start beeping, and that's enough of a distraction that everybody immediately drops everything because nobody can think straight while hearing a loud beeping in their ears.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, there's also the music that starts relatively quiet when you're in the high 7 or 5 minutes remaining, but as the bomb timer ticks down, or as you're doing mistakes, which makes the bomb timer ticks down faster,
Mm-hmm.
The music switches around and intensifies and really goes with that high level of pressure of an explosion that's about to happen if you keep panicking, and kind of encouraging you to sleep.
Yeah, no, it's like the tension of the music is there, but it's not meant to be overwhelming for the first minute. Then it starts escalating the pressure, which I think is really important to how the game plays. I think it really fits in very well. This is one of these cases where you're trying to prevent an explosion. I will say this song gets mildly hilarious when you're dealing with self-imposed challenges. You mentioned the various streams of the game. One of my favorite streams was actually an Achievement Hunter stream, specifically between Gavin Free and Jeremy Dooley, where Gavin was the one dismantling the bomb, and Jeremy had to go read off the PDF, but the PDF wasn't, in his hands or whatever. It was taped to a wall, and he had to climb a stepladder to find the individual pages. This was some kind of brilliant.
That's so creative.
It was. It was also, I'm just going to throw out there, it's funny, almost, it had the opposite effect. Gavin and Jeremy got so good at communicating with one another that they ended up slamming it because they just knew each other so well. Which I think is almost a disadvantage of this game, is if you know your partner well enough, a lot of the confusion is going to be eliminated just because of rapport. I think that's one of the issues why the game didn't have the same longevity as some, because people just got too good at it.
Yeah, because once you know the manual, you can't unlearn it.
Right. Which is a bit of a shame. This music is really good. The game is a really cool concept. It gave a lot of people a lot of hours of fun.
And, as far as the longevity of the game goes, there's two obvious solutions. One that did happen, which is modding it to add different modules that people don't necessarily know.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is that I think the world is ready for a sequel.
I would agree with that. I think we're at the point where that's the case.
And the landscape of video games is very different than it was at release 8 years ago, I believe. But I think, if anything, it's more fitting for games like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of... the pandemic has kind of changed how we game. And
yeah, the pandemic, and also, honestly, games like Town of Salem and Mafia and Among Us, proving that there's a lot of demand for even large-scale groups of people playing together.
Yep.
on something cooperative.
Yep.
And so, yeah, this one feels like it's ripe for a return, and I hope when the return goes, it will have that level of music, because honestly, even outside of the context of this game, I just really like this track. I think the main through line is very catchy. It builds up nicely. It does what it's supposed to do. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice song in a vacuum. I think it fits better in context. I think this is a fairly context-heavy song. But
yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't hurt to listen to. Like this, if this came up on my playlist, I wouldn't skip it. Let's say, like it's nice.
Exactly. Yeah. And on that, let's move on to some Mega Man X2 kinda.
So yeah, one of the first things I thought of when we started talking about this was, bots blowing up and Mega Man blowing the bots up and seeing the explosions. And eventually I'm like, all right, let's pick a Mega Man track. And I'm like, I kind of wanted to avoid X1 because, like, how many times have we talked about that soundtrack? Too many. Like, let's go with X2 or X3 or X4 or X something. And then I remembered I talked about this one guy, Dominic Ninmark, did a remix of Boomer Kuwanger Stage that just completely revitalized my opinion of Boomer Kuwanger Stage music as a whole. He also kind of did that for Mega Man X2, one of the final dungeons. X Hunter Stage, specifically the song X Hunted. And basically decided to pull a Master Boot record on this one because he made this just incredible chiptune metal remix that, yes, makes me want to blow up robots. This song makes me want to blow robots up.
It's a nice soundtrack to accompany, if not an explosion, at least life-threatening levels of tachycardia.
It is intense, yes. One for Eddie's workout playlist, I guess.
Yeah, good point.
What I like about this one is that, unlike the actual Super Nintendo Super Famicom version of the song, this one actually has almost a slower, more subdued intro before just launching into it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like it's a clash.
It is, but it's one that...
And to be clear, I mean that without thinking about how one of the first explosion-themed Robot Master back in Mega Man 1, I think, 1 or 2, was Crashman.
That was from 2.
Which could also be pronounced Clashman.
Yeah, you know what? I actually don't like Clashman's music all that much. I think the
Which
Mega Man...
explains why you didn't go that way.
Yeah, no, I tried. Like, Mega Man 2, just... I have never really been down with that soundtrack. And I know that's quasi-blasphemy to say, but...
Oh, yes it is.
When it comes to the classic Mega Man games, it's like Mega Man 1, and then I kind of skip straight to, like, Mega Man 5.
Meanwhile, I'm just a huge fan of Mega Man 2.
It's a great
Call me
video
basic,
game.
but... Yeah.
But
the music in particular, honestly.
It's never clicked with me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We can't agree on everything.
I'm not even saying it's, like, objectively bad. I'm literally just saying,
yeah,
like,
no. I realize you're not out there just looking for violence.
No. I like being non-controversial. Like, I will say things that I mean when I think something is actually incorrect, but this is not one of these cases. It's just one of these, like, oh, this is nice, and then I move on with my life. Whereas Mega Man X2, now I am looking for violence. I think Mega Man X2 is a better soundtrack than Mega Man X1.
Okay. We are dealing with hot takes today.
I mean,
Mega Man takes at the very least.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, Mega Man X1 is a classic soundtrack. It's got some great tracks on there. I just think Mega Man X2 is more interesting. It's got that Bubble Crab theme, which is like 12-4. It's got Crystal Snail, which is also at a weird time. This song... and
to be fair, on that point, on that comparison in particular, I cannot in good conscience even judge it because of how much of a part of my childhood Mega Man X was.
Oh, yeah.
Was X2 wasn't. I don't think I had the cartridge.
Yeah, now that, obviously the nostalgia factor is a big one there.
Yeah.
I still get Storm Eagle stuck in my head randomly, like, come on.
Absolutely.
I just think that Mega Man X2's soundtrack did more interesting things and had some very, very, very cool tracks. I think the composition quality is exactly the same, but it had more fun with it, had more experimentation time. It wasn't just 4/4, it was messing around with time and key, and from a strictly, studying music standpoint, I like 2 better. These are both great soundtracks, like, for crying out loud.
And I think we'll agree on that. If for Mega Man X2 they just tried to give us more Mega Man X, it wouldn't have landed. It would have overstayed its welcome immediately.
I fully agree, and it's one of the reasons why I do respect this soundtrack. But when they decided to go back to normal, they went with X Hunter, and then this remix X Hunted, which is absurd. There's just so much going on here.
Yeah.
They took probably one of the worst songs on Mega Man X2 and really kind of ramped it to a new level. This one didn't breathe new life into the original for me. I listened to the original and I'm like, this is kind of one note. Whereas this remix plays with it, messes with it, grows it beyond the sum of its parts.
Yeah, it adds a lot of variation.
Yeah.
And not just random variation like let's try this, let's try that. It kind of creates a through line, honestly.
Yes. Even as intense as it is, there is an almost musical narrative going on.
Yeah. It's not just everybody mashing their instruments as hard as they can.
Yeah, which can happen in these remixes. We've heard it before.
Oh, yes.
Hell, we've heard it outside of remixes, or even self-remixing. Cough, Sakuraba, cough. So yeah, seeing a song like this elevated to this degree is heartwarming. And on the subject of blowing stuff up, let's talk about a game that blew up my wallet once upon a time.
That it did. And I'm glad you have a healthier relationship with the genre right now.
Thank you.
With one game of the genre.
Technically let's move on.
But yeah, so Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. And it had a lot of very JRPG-like battle, which is fitting, some very epic themes, and then there was this one kind of niche mode. They did 2 reruns back-to-back, and then just didn't release another iteration for a while, which is weird about the timing because it was so fun, which was Boss Rush. Which was like 5 rounds of back-to-back-to-back bosses, all intense action all the time, and one of the most representative bosses that was on the banner when you picked the mode was the classic Final Fantasy bomb enemies, which is why mentally I associate that music with bombs and thus with explosion, even beyond the fact that when it comes to the music itself, it just starts at 100% and stays there for the whole duration, which is admittedly not that long. It's only a slightly over 1 minute track that loops.
Yeah, I actually, one of my notes was I wish the loop was longer because I feel like this would get repetitive if you're not careful.
Yeah, but at the same time, I picked a short track like this because it's so brief in parts. I hesitated for that spot between that and a track from Fire Emblem Shadow of Valencia, which was also even shorter, probably 30-second loop that just goes super hard for when you're fighting the bosses. And for this one, it's more fitting because the actual fight sequences in a Fire Emblem are relatively short compared to most of the gameplay.
Right.
But for this one, it feels a bit excessive, especially if you're having a hard time and you're getting pushback and you're strategizing mid-fight. Like, this is not a music to strategize to.
No. Now, having not played this mode and not being familiar with it, but being familiar with the game, I'm used to boss fights being a lot longer by virtue of hit point hard blocks and phases, requiring more strategy. And this song feels like it's not conducive to that, but if you're... what you're telling me is that it's shorter. Is that these fights are supposed to be shorter, so this makes a little more sense now. I do...
Well, there's 5 successive waves, so each of them doesn't have to be a full-length challenge boss level of challenge and duration. Which can excuse at least part of it, because it's go to the boss, break its face, move to the next one.
Right.
And especially given a game like Brave Exvius that has this JRPG root, but also had this taming and, by the gacha standards of that time, this action element to it, I feel like it made for an interesting spot in an interesting track by a composer that I think gains to be more well known because I love his work.
This was the guy who did Wild Arms as well, right? That's what we discovered?
Yes.
Yeah, I do like his work. I mean, I still listen to the first two FFPE soundtracks. Like, they are good.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember during the big Long Beach Fan Fest, I was kind of crushing on the violinist for some of the live performances. But the fact that I was willing to go see live performances of a gacha game says an awful lot about the quality of the soundtrack, even back then.
Exactly. And even in his other work for Chaos Rings, it's clear that he has a lot of affinity for these very solemn, very heavy themes, and it's fun for this track in particular to have him use the same instruments, but for something much more fast-paced. I think the heavy brass that's around there add to the precipitation because it's not instruments that are typically used this way.
Right. Yeah, no, the arrangement's really good on this. I wish I had more time to really dive in and listen to it because unfortunately my notes were fairly quick, but I was very impressed with the song from what I heard on it. And like,
to be fair, the song is fairly quick too. So
it is fairly quick. I gave it 2 listens, but I almost feel like this one deserves more. I kind of want to like really massage at it, but I don't know. Maybe look back at FFB as an order sometime in the future, or at least not involving the story, because I've heard some bad things about the story after I quit.
Honestly, that may sound a bit cruel, but the best time to do a full look back at the game will probably when we'll have the end of service announcement. It can take many more years.
Yeah, it's still kicking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're still releasing new characters. They released a Laswell with a spear, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad he's still around. Didn't they actually, like, kill off Fina entirely?
It was complicated. They killed the Dark One, which was the original one, but then brought her back, and she was protagonist of her own arc for a while, but then it got complicated, yes. Speaking of games and storylines that get way too complicated for their own good, let's talk about Yakuza 6.
Yakuza 6, one of my least favorite games in the franchise, but also one of my favorite soundtracks, in fact, if not my actual favorite soundtrack in the franchise, which is insane for Like a Dragon. It's got such a dichotomy.
Yes.
Because if you ignore the absolute crap of the story, and that story is a lot of crap.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot going on when you just listen to the soundtrack in a vacuum that is awesome. But one part of the story, one of the only parts of the story that I actually liked, was towards the end of the game when you're raiding the shipyard And you're throwing explosive barrels at oil tanks and blowing stuff up but good.
I will say, as this game's foremost hater, this was a good dungeon crawl.
This was a good dungeon crawl. This one stood out in part because it was the one part that actually made sense in this damn video game, and this music is a banger.
Oh, yeah.
I've been very complimentary of Saori Yoshida. She is probably the second best composer in the Like a Dragon franchise, behind Hidenori Shoji, the main guy. And she has composed no small amount of my favorites. She has composed, she was the mind behind the original Fiercest Warrior from Ishin, which has been remixed 84 gajillion times now. She is the composer behind a lot of the, like, funnier, fluffier stuff, like Judgment's VR stuff, and I think she did a chunk of Yakuza Zero's Cabaret Club minigame.
Yeah. Already a solid resume.
Yeah, she is the most versatile composer on the team. Hidenori Shoji has one mode, and he's very, very good at that mode. But if you take a guitar out of his hands, he's kind of awful.
If you stay one track for a Yakuza game, you haven't understood the essence of a Yakuza game, pun intended.
Ha 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 ha. Yeah, pretty much. So, on the other hand, when you need Saori Yoshida to come up with just a great song to blow stuff up to, she will absolutely deliver. This is one of her two most memorable tracks that feature emergency-related samples in the song. Funny, I was about to mention the siren opener of the song, because there is a siren sound effect in here that isn't a full sound effect. Meanwhile, another one of her best songs is KOG, which is Daibu Akutsu's boss music from Lost Judgment, which has a Hands in the Air sample just to throw in to the song. It sounds completely different than this because, again, she's incredibly versatile. I don't know, she just has a thing for emergency-related samples, I guess.
So I guess in spite of her versatility, she does have a niche.
She does have a niche. But, yeah, this song is just good. This one's a jam.
Oh, yeah. It really fits the theme for something that's not too fast, that it pressures you, especially in the quieter part of the dungeon crawls when you're not actively punching faces or throwing explosives, but it still conveys intensity, conveys purpose, it drives you forward. It does the whole 9 yards.
It does. You know, I mentioned Hidenori Shoji's guitar work, but honestly, Saori Yoshida's is nothing to sneeze at either.
Oh yeah, these are some good guitars.
Yeah.
Doing some good work. Like, a lot of the driving forward is on their end, honestly.
Yeah, and then there's also the synth guitars going into... I don't want to call it... Well, I mean, there is a solo, but there's I guess a bridge segment towards the end of the loop that is kind of a synth guitar thing that sounds really good.
Yeah. It just really does its best to convey that sense of urgency, and kind of in a similar way to the Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes track, honestly, but with more rock energy instead of like movie-like energy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a song to punch people to, and yes, to throw explosive barrels, because this is also the most violent dungeon in the history of the franchise that isn't Ishin. I don't know what else I can say. I'm just gushing about the same... I'm talking in circles. I'm gushing about the same things now.
Then how about we talk instead about some of the tracks that we kind of wanted to put in, but in the end didn't by time constraints?
Yep. So, first and foremost, we've talked Arknights a lot on this show, and briefly and obliquely when we were talking FFBE. Why isn't W's theme in here? Because frankly...
Yeah, why isn't W's theme in here?
Because it's bad.
Oh.
Didn't want to talk about this.
Looks like W's got an L then.
In this... Oh, God. Yes, in this case, yes. Anyway...
Look, you avoided the puns related to the episode number. I had to make up for it somewhere.
You did. You did. I'm putting my hands up and just yeah. No, I just don't like Renegade like at all. It's got Chinese low rent future on there, which is a Chinese guy trying to speak English and mumble rap is a really, really just unpleasant combination to my ears, and I did not want to get into this.
Oh dear.
Yeah,
sounds like a bad time.
It's not a great song. I know she recently got another theme song, and then there's a lot going on with the ambient synesthesia stuff, which I haven't really listened to. It didn't feel right to me to talk about this because I wouldn't even be talking about explosions. I'd just be talking about a song for a character that likes blowing stuff up and how bad the production and performance of the song are, which is not helpful, I think, for association.
Yeah, and we've not been strangers to talking about tracks we dislike because I think there's some interesting stuff to dive in, but if it's just I don't like it because it's bad or I don't like it because I think it's not fitting, and if there's not much to bring to the table, it's not really worth taking a spot that's better served by a track we'd want to talk about.
Exactly, and I actually part of my test whenever I do these is to kind of close my eyes and think, can I see the topic in my mind's eye as I'm listening to these? And if the answer is no, I don't pick the song.
And that's kind of the reason why on my honorable mentions, I didn't pick multiple Dance Dance Revolution track, because the relationship with explosions can be pretty obvious with tracks like Boom Boom Dollar and Dynamite Rave and other tracks that have not only explosions in the name but explosive in the many, many samples. But the story kind of starts and ends there.
Yeah.
So this felt like more of a joke pick than a real entry, and I ended up opting against, but I was surprised looking into it at how many tracks, even in the first few Dance Dance Revolutions, have explosion-related themes and names.
Dancing is at its best when it's explosive, so
I guess they do have that kind of universal appeal.
Yeah.
And then there was also some strategy games pick that I considered but didn't put in because rather than at 3, I feel like there's a fair amount of good entries for tracks that have this explosive energy, but I feel like I've already talked about this game enough, so I didn't want to sound redundant. And then there was the one that probably was the closest to get in, which was a track for Total Annihilation that had this classical music feel to it, because I think that that's a kind of area that other tracks we've ended up picking didn't cover, but in the end one of the picks had to fall, and this was the last one to do so.
Yeah, and there's an obvious association between classical music and explosions. I mean, just listen to the 1812 Overture.
Yeah, or, The Ride of the Valkyries.
Right.
Sure, it's more burning than explosions, but it's both, honestly.
I mean, when you think Ride of the Valkyries, unless you have grown up under a rock, at least some part of you is probably thinking of Apocalypse Now and Vietnam War as a result.
Yeah. It's part of the cultural zeitgeist at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it's a shame. Now that you're saying that, another one that I skipped out on was a happier version of Explosions because we even mentioned it in our intro, and that's Fireworks. And I was thinking, wait, what about Chrono Trigger's ending theme? A sky filled with fireworks. Why didn't I pick that one? That would have been good to have on here.
Yeah, and I did think about the association with fireworks, and that's the track we're going to talk about next.
Well, then let's go ahead and talk about it, because I listened to this and I immediately stopped and what am I listening to right now?
Well, you are listening to a track from Honkai Star Rail, kinda, because it's the HoYoverse thing where they do amazing trailer music and never actually put it in the games.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah. And this one is one of a character that is named Sparkle, or her Japanese name Hanabi, meaning fireworks.
Aha.
You can't get any more literal than that. And so, yeah, there's a few detonations at the start of the track which also convey that, and overall, it has a part of celebration, but mostly it's a more worrying aspect of the character that's emphasized, because the deal about this Sparkle is that she is one of the agents of the incarnation of the fun across the cosmos, even at the expense of others, even when it means, say, sending a bomb threat in an extremely elaborate way in order to foster cooperation. And so I thought of more the bomb threat episode, which is actually something that happens, and I just thought there was something to say, not necessarily about the track itself, but about it and the character in general. And it was a difficult pick because the music for the bomb threat is a more low-key remix of the trailer theme, but at this point I preferred putting the original because it just made more sense, and honestly the trailer is pretty fantastic. But this one, when it comes to the music itself, emphasizes admittedly more the weirdness aspect of it on the threatening aspects than the celebration or indeed the explosive aspect of the character.
When listening to this, I just heard confusion. I wasn't sure what I was listening to. I wasn't sure how we got to explosions.
Yeah, because there's the humming, then there's the electronic part, then there's a more melodic part, and then it goes into something somber. It goes every which way.
Yeah.
Which I think the best rapport I can establish is that explosions, even the one meant to bring joy and to entertain and to celebrate things, can be hard to control. They can go every which way if you don't pay attention to them. So light your fireworks safely, people.
Boy, that would be good advice for half of everyone living here, it seems.
I'm nothing if not inspirational in those ways too.
Yeah.
Now then, how about we expose you for the liar you are?
The thing is, I wasn't a liar when I started this. I really didn't want to pick BFG Division. And then I watched GDQ. And I saw Grand Poo World 3's run at GDQ. And I saw the final boss. And the final boss had Composer doing a 16-bit version of BFG Division.
And it's very good.
It's very, very good. I just threw my hands up and I'm like, I've got to talk about this. This is one of the most impressive remixes on a technical level I think I've ever heard in my life.
And what's crazy, we'll come back to the track itself, but what's crazy is that he did that twice because there's also a crazy remix of Hades music.
There's a lot of crazy remixes in Grand Poo World 3.
And they're both really good.
Yeah.
And some of the music even are part of the puzzle solving.
Uh-huh. No, I was absolutely just taken aback by how good this was. And I'm like, I'm listening to a Mario boss set to BFG Division in 16 bits. And then as I listened to the soundtrack itself, I realized just how much panning and how much dynamics were going on in this remix.
Yeah.
This is insane.
It's the kind of remix that cannot happen without understanding the original track. And I say that with a capital U.
Yeah. Yeah, this is...
And to understand a Mick Gordon track, you have to be incredibly talented.
Yeah, it's like every time I think composer's reached like the pinnacle of what he can do, he does something like this, and I have to kind of stop and go, how do I get him and Barb out of ROM hacks into making actual video games? Because I want to buy and play a video game these two work on together.
Well, they blew up the universe, so there's probably going to not be another Grand Prix World for at least 4 years.
At least.
So maybe there's a window there.
I don't know whether it'll happen. This is one of these things where it's like, I don't know where either of them can go from here in the ROM hack space, but that's kind of what I said after Grand Prix World 2, and I got proved wrong there, so who knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes something happens.
Honestly, how dare a composer not just be a good composer, but also be very good at level design? Like, it's unfair.
I'm jealous of his abilities, I'll be honest. But yeah, basically every once in a while something happens that deserves a spotlight. And despite my trepidation towards BFG Division, in the time between setting on this topic and my initial set list and then hearing this song, I'm like, I have to go against my own grain here and just put this in.
Yeah.
We know how good Mick Gordon is. We talk about him a lot. We had a whole special on him, and we talked about it at the very beginning of this episode. But even then, hearing this remix is something special, and more people need to hear it.
Yeah, it's the kind of remix that adds even more to the original. Or not necessarily adds more, but makes it look at it in a different way. It's elevated perhaps a little.
Yeah.
Especially if you haven't listened to it time and time and time again.
Yeah, I actually, I hadn't heard BFG Division in a while before I heard this song. And I actually went back and listened to the original, which has a staggering 46 million views on YouTube. And I'm like, somehow this is exactly the same, just this time it has live instruments and the 16-bit version doesn't. How did Composer do this? There's like a bajillion layers in here. How did you get that onto a Super Nintendo? I don't want to say cartridge because I don't think it was a physical cartridge, but how did you get it into a Super Nintendo ROM? How did that happen? Like, the amount of just technical wankery going on in here is impressive to an incredible degree.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to really play and really know with the constraint of the medium.
Yeah.
And kind of draw blood from a stone to reach that level of intensity and richness.
Yeah. So, in an episode about explosions, if I didn't bring this up, I'd be doing everyone a disservice. So, yeah, Composer made a liar out of me. I have no regrets. And with that, I guess we can't talk about explosions without talking about, explosions.
Yeah, turns out, while there isn't a literal explosion man in the Mega Man Robot Master's name, there is a game named Explosion Man, and the theme of this episode just made me think back to it.
Understandably.
This was one of the early games of the Xbox Live Arcade big era and initiative that did a lot of work to launch a lot of indies.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think I barely touched Explosion Man because there was already a couple more games that felt more interesting in the area by the time, and much more by the time I actually got my hands on an Xbox. But the fact that there's this game that released that kind of left a mark, I'll always get behind the kind of initiatives and movements that help put out some names of smaller studios out there. And I think this one did a lot of great work in a almost similar fashion to what Flash games did for a lot of small-scale development.
As for me, I am at least somewhat familiar with this game. I didn't play the first Splosion Man, but I did play some Miss Splosion Man. I'm not quite sure how I got there.
Yeah.
I can't say I remember enjoying playing it very much, but the vibe was there. It was very intriguing.
Yeah, like, it does a lot to push its identity forward first and foremost.
That's a good way of putting it.
Like, the characters are literally made out of explosions. We had to talk about them during this episode.
Right? It's just some things you can't really avoid.
The jump button is an explosion.
Uh-huh. So, this song, weirdly, it almost sounds like an almost spy thing. Like, it sounds like a lighthearted spy thing, like the sort of thing that Austin Powers was lampooning.
Definitely light-hearted, and there's a more TV or film sensibility to it than a true video game vibe to it, which makes sense given that the composer, Joshua Mosley, mainly worked on series and movies, and this is his only video game credit.
It sounds like it. I know sometimes people have made the leap. I know Jeff Van Dyke, he started in movies and ended up doing video games. So that is a thing that happens. Sometimes scoring artists will move from one to the other. I'm fairly certain just by his style that Masashi Hamauzu's on the same category, but I couldn't say that to a certainty. I'm not familiar enough with his career to say that definitively. But if it was true for him, I wouldn't be surprised at all. He is a very cinematic style.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the use of horns here. I did hear something very odd, though. At about 46 seconds, there's a weird stoppage that sounds like a hard edit, so I don't know what that is. That one took me right out of the song.
Yeah, I get what you mean. We heard it a little, and it's I hope it's not in the game, but honestly, I don't have the means to verify right now.
Yeah, same. Wouldn't be the first time I heard a bad loop in a game, but I'm not sure 46 seconds is point of a loop. I'm going to be going off on technicalities if I keep this up. Obviously, like the spy thrillers and TV stuff that we've been talking about, it's very big on horns. Like, the song is a lot of horns, a lot of sax. It's just sort of...
And I believe it's the theme for the first level, which is when you are escaping your lab. I'm not 100% sure, the details are a bit distant, but I think that's what happens. And this feels right for an explosive escape from a lab theme.
Yeah, I'll buy that. For something a little more lighthearted and doesn't take itself too seriously. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. If anything, may this track be the fireworks to end this episode that the theme of the character named after fireworks wasn't? Because those fireworks, when handled properly, take care, people, it can bring joy. It's a spectacle, and explosions are recurring themes in video games because they're fun.
Yeah, they are.
Enough to make a whole character about them named Splosion Man. Like, people saw that back in the early 2010s and were like, yeah, sure, I'll play that guy.
Right?
And then I'll play that miss.
Right?
Sure, explosions are gendered now.
Why not?
Oh, no. I mean, as long as they don't set fire to half of the forest on the western coast.
Oh, I just watched Discord disconnect and reconnect me.
Oh, great.
Nice.
Well, it looks like Discord is exploding as well. So, how about we take it swiftly towards the last section of this episode?
Let's do it. Music Arcade now playing. So,
given there wasn't no playing in last episode, there's a bit of a backlog.
You got a long list. I have a much shorter one for reasons which I'll discuss.
Yeah. So, I've played a fair amount of relatively low commitment games, which is why I still haven't gotten around to get into Dawn Trail proper, but I approached it, and this meant I went all the way to the Zero Mist fight in Final Fantasy XIV, and that theme is great.
That theme is great. I don't know. It's like I like Soken's original work, but when he remixes the OG, he does a great job, pretty much universally.
When he remixes the OG and has fun with it.
Especially. One of my favorite songs of the entire soundtrack is this version of Force Your Way from FF8, the boss theme, that plays during E1, E2, and E6?
Yeah, and for that tier, mine is probably E11.
Yeah, that's a good one as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of good work you can do by taking something that's already good and just putting your own spin on it. And he's got a lot of good spins on a lot of good tracks.
He's got a lot of good spins on the Zero Mist theme. His sounds great.
Absolutely. It's intense, it's different, it's fast-paced, it's very impressive stuff. Like, when I approached that part, I called to my FC, and the chief went, "I want in right now, I want an excuse to hear that music again."
I don't blame him.
Her.
Yeah. No, this one's good. The boss fight's good, the music's good. The EX is a little easy, it's got one problem mechanic, and the rest is pretty doable.
Yeah. Next, since last time we had a now playing I was in, Zenless Zone Zero started. And I got kind of into it. I'm staying entirely free to play on this one, because I am not paying for free simultaneous Hoyoverse games.
Understandable.
I have my limits. Yep. But it's very fun. And honestly, part of it isn't even just financial limitation. Is that with playing characters feeling like it has more skill expression than ever, I kind of want to see how far I can take things by staying with my current roster and just not pulling for a year.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. And the game, its aesthetic is pretty fantastic, and its music has some strength, some parts that are just kind of fine, but it has some bangers, and this one is kind of a hybrid field theme with a second part when you actually get into the fight from the TV-based exploration, and I really like its vibe. It's for the area that's managed by this construction company, and yeah, it just has these banging, clanging sound along with this bassy, deep electronics that I really ended up liking.
It was a cute song. I will say, you mentioned the aesthetic. The screenshot, at least on the YouTube thumbnail, reminded me a little bit of The World Ends With You.
Yeah. It definitely has at least a way to evoke that vibe here and there. They're going to have to go places because live service, but it has this very urban feeling, and you feel when you play that the team in charge of Zenless Zone Zero is the younger linging team on Hoyoverse. It's kind of the Splatoon team of Hoyoverse, if you will.
I like that comparison. That's cute.
Yeah. Then I played some Dawnkeeper to just enjoy a couple of runs. I saw some streams and I was like, oh yeah, Dawnkeeper, haven't played that in a while. And turns out I saw those streams because they added a lot of content in an update, and it's fun stuff.
Okay.
Once things feel a bit less samey because of the amount of of material, and while no individual track has really stuck to me per se, the musical atmosphere and the fact it changes completely depending on which of the two characters you actually play is pretty nice. Then we have Gestalt Steam and Cinder, which is a Metroidvania, which has been produced by two content creators I've been following for like over a decade easily.
And that is a game that I have been trying to start multiple times this week and have not managed to actually do so. So hopefully this afternoon finally breaks the streak.
Here's hoping. The music is fine, but hasn't left that much of a mark. Not as much as, say, the playability. Movement works great, and that's 80% of the work to get me into a Metroidvania. Maybe it's a bit too in love with its own story for its own good, however.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, perhaps the best demonstration of how I was looking for something I can fire, play for an hour, and then drop, Soulstone Survivors. There's a lot of other games in that genre that I like more.
Yeah.
But and when I first played this game, I outright disliked it. But I came back to it on a different angle, and this may sound a bit harsh, but by seeing it as content, I think I'm playing to its strength, because the construction, the diversity of the modes, the way the characters play, a lot of other games feel better on a lot of individual aspects. Aesthetic, music, indeed. If I want one specific aspect of a Survivors game, I will go to another game before this one. But it has a lot of stuff in there.
It does. I played this one for a little while. I did like it-ish, but yeah, it's pretty forgettable as Survivor likes go. It does have a cool... Well, half of its soundtrack is cool because every stage has two different stage musics. One is very generic and the other is actually really neat.
But yeah, when you take it for a lot of content that you have inside a single client, it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Earth Defense Force 6, which we'll probably play together.
Yep.
And in fact, a couple of days ago, I was at a friend's place and we played it on split screen.
Ooh.
And it was great fun.
Cool.
They did a lot of work to make the generally co-op heavy class, the Air Raider, way more viable solo, way more survivable. And they do some fun things with the start of the game, where they set this atmosphere of complete despair, which builds up to something very neat about 13 missions in, if memory serves well. But the very fact that they are doing an atmosphere that's thought out down to the music in the menus, I think works very much to their credit. Two more and I'm good.
Okay.
So, first of those two, there's Fields of Mysteria, which is another game, one might say, in the series of games that try to be another Stardew Valley. And I specifically say another Stardew Valley and not another Harvest Moon, because I think these are slightly different vibes, and a lot of games have tried and something has been missing a lot of the times for me, but this one seems to do a lot right. It feels full of quality of life in spite of the fact it's in early access. It doesn't try to really reinvent the wheel or to have a gimmick that's as present as a lot of other games. But it feels familiar, but in a way that adds a different take on It's what you want if you want more of the same stuff, but you don't want to go back to the stuff you already know.
Right.
Basically. And so it does that very well. And it looks cute.
There's something to be said for looking cute.
Exactly. And finally, not a video game, but interesting to mention here, for this past couple of weekends on Hoyoverse lore server, given that they have a lot of reference to Wagner's Ring Cycle, we have been doing a watch of a DVD set for an opera performance of the Ring Cycle, 1 or 2 acts at a time, in order to not have like 12 continuous hours. But listening to it, and to especially at the second part, the start of the Valkyrie part, it was kind of fascinating to see, as I put it, leitmotifs in their natural environments.
Yeah.
Especially as enthusiasts for the work of Masayoshi Soken, who loves his leitmotifs.
Yep.
Turns out, it's fine to be heavy-handed with them. In any case, that's a lot of stuff, so if there were other games I partook in that time, I don't remember, and I've gone for long enough. What have you played? Let's talk some Arknights.
So I have not played that much, other than Arknights, as we've mentioned. That's been for a couple of factors. First and foremost, the Olympics is happening, and I'm kind of an Olympic nutball, so I've been watching a lot of that. But also...
Honestly, the Olympics is some of the best second screen experience that can be, probably.
I definitely agree there. It's a shame it's always on my first screen these days.
Yeah, and it's a shame I don't have a source that I can just put on a second screen that doesn't require way too much account creation and information surrendering before I can get a quality stream.
Yeah, there is that. I spent money on a Peacock subscription for the duration, but I almost put in, because of a discussion you and I had, a song from DOA Beach Volleyball, entirely because I've been watching a ton of beach volleyball. I didn't do this because I'm not playing it. I'm just watching it. What I have been playing, let's talk Arknights.
To be fair, DOA Beach Volleyball is mostly watching.
That is to be fair, and that kind of sucks, because I'd actually really like a real beach volleyball game that I would totally play, and that was the comment you made, because I'm already a DOA fan, and if DOA Beach Volleyball was actually good beach volleyball to let me actually play, like, a very athletic sport, I would play that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'd be even, as you put it, more misunderstood.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk Arknights. So, Arknights has its annual, New Year, Lunar New Year, but 6 months late because global shenanigans event. Here are people's so's. And I don't like this event at all. This is the most boring event since Hortus de Escapismo, or however you pronounce that, the stupid one about Executor.
That's weird. Arknights hasn't done bowing in a while.
Yeah, no, but instead of, the intrigue of not China's government, I get a lot of bureaucratic hand-wringing and farming, and I'm just like, I don't like any of these characters or anything that's going on here. What is happening? I don't care about this. The music's pretty good, though. And
at least there's that.
I did ping you with the announcement, but the new character Shu is actually voiced by Susie Young, who we like around here. She voiced Chitose in Like a Dragon and Good Wealth, and Yuffie and those. And hey, good for her.
Honestly, between that and the fact that I think not in global yet, but they've announced back-to-back both a third character design by Nami and then a collab with Evangelion. Wait,
no,
was it
Sanrio? We're getting Delicious in Dungeon. That has nothing to do with Evangelion last I checked.
Oh yeah, Delicious in Dungeon. Sorry, I was confusing with another gacha game that announced that.
Arknights is
Anyway.
doing some weird things. Good weird,
Yes.
usually. I'm not sure about this Illicit Dungeon thing, but weird.
Yes.
Next up, my newest pick a game was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, which was... Boy, that was a game.
Uh-huh.
I have never been more ambivalent towards a story in my life, but when the story went away and let me just play the video game, it was a lot of fun.
And that's probably a good thing, given that the story is very distinct, but the gameplay, there's actually a fair amount of games with that kind of dungeon crawling. Like, it's a known formula that the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon just put a spin on it. But
I think
there's a lot more games, some of them pretty obscure, that do very similar things.
I think Brimcon said that this was the same team that did She-Ran the Wanderer, which is also of this style.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah, it's sort of like OG roguelike dungeon crawler experience.
Legend of the Unemployed Ninja, I think.
Yeah,
was,
one of those.
One of them too.
I like the music. I like the game. Hate the story. Very confused as to my feelings on this game, is the end result here. And then finally,
Alright then.
I'm still poking my way through Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and one of the late game bosses is really cool.
Ooh.
I'm not quite at the end yet. I thought this was the final boss, but then another one showed up and was like, alright, I guess I gotta fight you now, and that's where I had to stop for that day, and I have not gotten back to it yet, so I need to.
Love it when that happens.
Yep. Mechanically, this was a really cool boss. I don't want to talk about the mechanics too much, but I will say it was very unique in SMT lore. And so far it is doing the thing that It fixed the thing that I complained about from SMT5 Vanilla, and that is the SMT5 Vanilla endgame was kind of bland and boring, but this one's actually doing some cool stuff, so good.
Sweet.
Good.
Excellent.
It has done the checklist thing where it checked off every problem that SMT5 Vanilla had and started correcting it, so
Yeah,
good for them.
Yeah, from interviews, it really looked like this re-release was essentially the team taking 1 year of additional polish that they wanted to put in the game but didn't, and love it when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, would have loved it if they just released the game in that state even more, but...
I agree, and in fact, this is the last time I'm going to pre-order one of these games, which is kind of sad because I really do like supporting them. But like, if I'm going to a year or two later get a definitive edition that's better anyway, like, why would I buy Persona 5 when Persona 5 Royal's a thing? Why would I buy SMT 5 when SMT 5 Vengeance is a thing?
Absolutely.
Like, there's just no point. I just gotta wait for the definitive edition. Even now, Persona 3 Remix or whatever is getting its Persona 3 Reload is getting its DLC for The Answer, which was cut out of the base game. Eventually, it's gonna be a definitive version of that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So I'm just like, all right, I'm just not. I haven't bought Persona 3 yet, which I almost feel bad about because I do like supporting Sega on this stuff, but if I'm going to get a better version of the game later anyway, I should just wait for that.
Which reminds me, as a last game I've played in the interim, a little bit, I just started it, but I have played some of the Baton Kaitos 1 and 2 remakes that released a couple of months ago, and I never played Baton Kaitos before, heard a lot of good things on it, and the system I can take or leave for now, but I really appreciate how much of a douche the main character is. He's detestable, and I say that as a compliment.
That's weird. Usually when a main character is that awful, I'm like, well, go away. I don't want to play with you anymore. I don't want you to win.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm like that, but I see room for growth in how awful he starts off as.
I mean, if it worked for Soul Nomad and the World Eaters.
Yeah. But mainly I bring it up right now because Sakuraba mentioned
There it is.
Perfection!
There it is. Hey, I at least got the joke about him earlier.
Absolutely.
All right, that sounds
And
like
that's when I noted, oh right, I played that game too, even though I didn't put it originally in the No Playing playlist.
There you have it. All right, I think that's about all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for joining us in Blowing Stuff Up. As always, you can find a playlist of the songs we talked about and our contact information in the description. And I hope to hear from you soon, and have yourselves a good one, folks.
And remember, handle fireworks safely.
For God's sake, yes, please.